Welcome, dreamers, to the realm where time whispers its forgotten hymn. Tonight, we drift into the veiled mists of the prehistoric past, to trace the silent footsteps of a people who once walked upon the sacred soil of ancient America. Long before empires rose, before language carved itself into stone, there were the Clovis, their name now etched in mystery. Echoes from fluted spear points, buried in time. Who were they? These silent artisans of stone and bone. Why did their presence flare so brightly in the twilight of the last ice age, only to vanish into the hush of millennia? Let us not rush to answers, dear, for this is not a tale of certainty, but of gentle wonder. A story not of conquest or conflict, but of quiet survival beneath endless stars. Before we embark on this journey through time's mysteries, if these ancient whispers resonate with your soul, let your presence be known through a gentle light, and join our circle of dreamers by subscribing to continue these nightly journeys into history's hidden realms. Share with us, fellow dreamers, from which corner of the world you're joining tonight's contemplation. Let the global community of history's mysteries connect across time zones as we drift together into the past. Now, find stillness. Breathe with the rhythm of the earth. Let the darkness cradle you as we return to the world of the Clovis, America's first inhabitants. Their story begins not in cities or scrolls, but in the wind-blown silence of the land. Close your eyes and let the ancient dawn unfold. Long before the rivers carved their familiar paths and forests rose where now only prairie sways, the land we now call North America lay beneath the dominion of ancient ice. It was a time not marked by kings or calendars, but by the breath of glaciers and the quiet migration of life. The world was colder then, quieter, and infinitely more mysterious. Across the great continent, the Laurentide ice sheet loomed in solemn stillness, an immensity of frozen time stretching from what is now the Canadian interior to the northern reaches of what would become the United States. Beneath that glacial canopy, the earth slept, but south of the ice, the land stirred with life. Wind swept the plains, mammoths wandered the low valleys, and beneath the open sky, the first people moved like shadows at the edge of history. We call them the Clovis, but they did not call themselves this, for they left behind no written words. Their voices, if they sang, are lost to time, and only stone speaks for them now. Flint napped with impossible precision, points fluted with silent grace, artifacts unearthed like prayers whispered into the soil. These are the echoes they left us. The name Clovis comes not from their own mouths, but from a chance discovery in the quiet town of Clovis, New Mexico. There, in the early 20th century, bones of a mammoth were uncovered, pierced by a spear point unlike any seen before. This point, crafted of chert, was unmistakably shaped by human hands, and from this moment, the great mystery was born. Who were these artisans of stone? Where did they come from, and where did they go? Their story begins not in certainty, but in shadow. Picture it, dear dreamer. 10,000 years before the pyramids touched the sky, they did not know they were shaping the earliest chapter of a continent's story. They knew only the rhythm of the seasons, the migration of animals, and the language of fire and flint. The wind was their music, the stars their map. They traveled in small bands, their numbers unknown, their lifeways hidden in time's silence. But through archaeological breath and brush, we glimpsed them crafting tools, following herds, perhaps huddling around fires as northern lights danced silently above. Their world was not barren but alive in ways we can scarcely imagine. Giant sloths slumbered beneath trees long vanished. Saber-toothed cats prowled edges of shadow. And most magnificent of all, the mammoth, a great woolen beast, moved across the grasslands like a drifting mountain. The Clovis knew these creatures, hunted them, honored them. Perhaps, with each fluted point carved from stone, they participated in a ceremony of survival. These tools were not crude implements, but works of deliberate artistry. To shape one was to speak the language of earth and time. To hold one in hand today is to hold a heartbeat from the Ice Age. But the mystery deepens. For these points, these icons of Clovis life appear across vast swaths of the continent, from the cool highlands of the American Northwest to the humid forests of the Southeast. Such unity of style and technique suggests something remarkable. A shared knowledge, a network of knowing. How did this culture, without writing, without metal, without wheels or beasts of burden, achieve such reach? Was it migration, sweeping like wind from an ancestral cradle? Was it diffusion, knowledge passed like fire between bands who met only at the edges of the season? Or was there something else, some forgotten mechanism of memory we no longer understand? Their campsites were ephemeral, their shelters lost, but in the soil they left clues, hearts stained by ancient ash, scatterings of bones, ochre-stained stone, and always the points, always the signature of a people whose hands knew stone as intimately as we know glass. Let us pause here, in the long hush before agriculture, before cities, before myth. Let us breathe with the Clovis and listen. Imagine a woman napping flint beneath the open sky. Her child plays nearby, chasing dust motes in the fading light. Her partner returns with news of caribou far to the north. The clan gathers beneath a canopy of hides, stretched tight with sinew, and as night falls, they do not fear the darkness. It is their cradle. The earth beneath them is sacred, though they would not call it such. It simply is alive. Speaking in signs, when the mammoth's trail bends eastward, they follow, not in pursuit, but in partnership. When the rivers swell with meltwater, they move, not in panic, but in rhythm. Ours is a world of speed. Theirs was a world of breath. In their silence, they remind us of something we have nearly forgotten. That to live is not to conquer, but to harmonize. To listen not with the ears, but with the bones. And yet, even as we begin to understand them, they vanish. The Clovis culture disappears from the archaeological record with a suddenness that baffles even the most careful minds. Around 10,900 years ago, their signature points stop appearing. Other styles emerge, other people rise, but the Clovis name fades like mist at sunrise. What happened? Was it climate shifting again as the younger Dryas plunged the world into sharp, sudden cold? Was it overhunting, as some claim, though the evidence resists such certainty? Was it cultural transformation, the Clovis simply changing, becoming something new under new names? Or was it something older, still a cycle we do not yet understand, a rhythm deeper than even ice or fire? Tonight, we do not chase these answers. We honor their unknowability. We sit in the stillness between what was and what might have been, and we give thanks to the stone voices that remain. The Clovis walked beneath a different sky. They listened to different winds, but perhaps, in our quietest moments, their shadows still move beside us, still shaping the edge of our dreams. Let us rest now, beneath the same stars that once lit their way. And in that hush, let the story of the Clovis continue. In the quiet hours of night, when the stars form rivers of silver across the sky, let us return not to the familiar forests and prairies of ancient America, but to a land now swallowed by ocean and time, a place where two worlds once touched, where sky met snow, and earth became a path between continents. We call it Beringia. It was not a bridge in the way we think of bridges now. There were no arches of stone, no spans of iron. Beringia was a continent-wide sweep of frozen steppe, connecting what we know today as Siberia and Alaska. It stretched vast and wide, a cold breath between Asia and the Americas, a place where wind carved the snow into whispering dunes and herds of mammoth thundered across a land that no longer exists. It is here, in this liminal place between lands and times, that the story of the Clovis begins to take form. For before they could hunt mammoth in New Mexico or leaf-fluted points in the sands of South Carolina, they had to arrive. And though the how is still debated, the journey is written into the bones of time. Some say they came by foot, crossing Beringia during the last great glaciation, when sea levels had fallen low enough to expose that hidden corridor. Others whisper of boats, small and silent, hugging the ice-rimmed coastlines of a forgotten shore. Both theories shimmer with possibility, each shaped by fragments of evidence and great stretches of wonder. But this much is clear: they came, not as conquerors, not as settlers in the modern sense, but as wanderers, carriers of fire, followers of game, seekers of places yet unseen. Their journey was not a march, but a migration through generations, a long, slow unfolding of footsteps across the breadth of the earth. Imagine them now in your mind's eye. A band of travelers moves across the frozen expanse, wrapped in furs, leaning into the wind. A child is cradled against a mother's chest, his breath a soft cloud in the cold air. Elders walk beside them, their eyes scanning the horizon, reading the land like scripture. They do not hurry. Time for them flows like a river beneath ice, steady and deep. They walk not into danger, but into promise. Behind them, the lands of Asia grow distant. Ahead, the Americas await. Vast, unspoiled, mysterious, and always the ice is near. Great wars of it to the east and west. A frozen silence that speaks of eternity. Yet Beringia itself is a lever mosaic of steppe and tundra, rich with grasses, lichens, and live caribou and muskox, giant beavers and dire wolves, and the great mammoth, whose curved tusks rise like crescent moons from the snowy earth. These were the companions of the Clovis ancestors. They followed the herds, gathered roots from the thawed summer soil, watched the changing of the sky. Perhaps they paused at sacred places, rock outcrops that echoed with the call of geese, lakes that shimmered with ancient starlight. Perhaps they told stories around fire of spirits, of dreams, of places waiting beyond the horizon. We can never know their words, but their footsteps are still faintly visible. Archaeologists, like dreamers with brushes, have found signs of this great journey. Sites like Bluefish Caves in the Yukon, where cut-marked bones hinted human presence from more than 20,000 years ago. Monteverde in Chile, far to the south, where remnants of hearths and chewed seaweed suggest people lived there even before the Clovis rose. And between these points, the story deepens. Could it be that the Clovis were not the first, but rather one of many waves of people who entered the land? That before them came others whose stories are buried too deep for us to find? If so, The Clovis are not the beginning, but the bloom of a much older seed. Still, they are the first we can name, the first whose tools sing with unmistakable human hands. As they emerged from Beringia and into the broader sweep of North America, they encountered a continent untouched by human architecture, but not empty. Forests rose like cathedrals, rivers wandered like silver serpents. The land pulsed with rhythms older than memory. It was a paradise of danger and abundance. To the east, the vast plains. To the west, towering mountains. To the south, the deserts whispering beneath the sun. And through it all, the Clovis moved. They were not one people, but many bands of kin, connected not by empire but by craft. The fluted point, that exquisite blade of stone, became their signature, passed from hand to hand, across distance and time, taught beside a fire, shaped with care, released into the hunt like an arrow of memory. In their hands, the ancient art of lithic technology reached its high form. The channel flake, removed from the base of each point, allowed for hafting, attaching two shafts of wood with sinew and pitch. It was a subtle perfection, a quiet revolution, and it allowed them to survive, to hunt, to eat, to protect, but also, perhaps, to share. Was the making of a Clovis point merely functional, or was it ceremonial? Did each one carry a meaning known only to the maker? Were they marked with signs of clan or spirit? We cannot know, but we can wonder. Each point buried in the earth today is a voice calling from the long walk, a message not in words, but in stone. The Clovis did not leave cities. They left pathways, campsites scattered across riverbanks and hills. Debitish the flakes from tool-making left, where stories were once told, bones split from marrow ash from hearths long gone cold. And in these signs, we find the memory of the long walk. It is said that Beringia was eventually swallowed by the rising sea, that as the ice melted, the ocean returned to reclaim the path. The land bridge vanished beneath the waves, and the continents were sundered once more. But for a time brief in geologic measure but vast in human memory, it was a threshold, and through it came the ancestors of the Clovis, carriers of tools, weavers of story, guardians of a knowledge now lost in the soil. Tonight, as you drift through this memory, imagine the wind across Beringia. Feel the crunch of frozen grass beneath your feet. Hear the cry of a far-off bird returning to the same sky it has always known. The journey is not over. It simply changed its shape. And the Clovis, once they arrived, began to write their silent chapter upon a new land. Let us follow them now, into the heart of a continent. In a world without written words, stone became the sacred tongue. The Clovis people, wanderers of the ancient Americas, spoke not in ink or parchment, but through the edge of obsidian, the fracture of flint, the shimmering veins of Their language was struck with bone and fire, shaped by patience and knowing. It was this soft clack of hammerstone on core, the deliberate pressure of thumb against blade, to speak their truth. They shaped the earth. And that language still lives, hidden beneath the soil, waiting to be read by hands, gentle enough to listen. Imagine, dreamer, the hush of early dawn across an ice age meadow. The smoke of a fading fire coils upward into a sky streaked with the first silver of morning. A young man, barely more than a boy, sits cross-legged near a scatter of stones. He selects one dark, glossy, fine-grained and studies it with a reverence we rarely give to stone. He knows its weight, its angle, its song. He raises his hammerstone and begins to strike. The first blows are rough, knocking away the shell, but soon, with rhythm and breath, the shape emerges. A flake here, a pressure there, not hurried, never careless. Each movement is rooted in generations of memory. For flint knapping is not a casual art. It is a ritual, an inheritance, a communion with stone. The Clovis point, so named long after its creators passed into silence, is the pinnacle of this language. Leaf-shaped, carefully fluted from base to center, razor-edged and perfectly symmetrical. Its purpose was clear to pierce hide and muscle, to bring down the great beasts of the world, but its form speaks of beauty, precision, and perhaps, something more. To hold one in your hand today is to touch the breath of another age. These points were not isolated curiosities. They were widespread, found from Montana to Florida, from Idaho to Texas, and in their consistency lies mystery. How could a people so scattered across a vast land create with such unity? Some suggest a shared origin, a cultural hearth where the technique was born and from which it radiated outward like ripples on a pond. Others propose trade, or kinship, or seasonal gatherings beneath the stars where artisans shared their craft. Whatever the truth, the Clovis point became a signature and message, a quiet chant across the bones of a continent, and the language of stone did not stop with weapons, scrapers, burins, awls, blades. Each tool carefully shaped for its task, each with edges honed not just to cut, but to survive. These tools helped them dress hides, carve wood, shape bone, harvest the gifts of the wild, The Clovis did not live in ignorance. They lived in balance. They did not merely endure the land, they spoke to it. Through stone, they answered the demands of nature. And nature, in its own language, responded with bounty and danger alike. There is something deeply contemplative in this ancient conversation. They did not take more than needed. There were no storehouses, no waste. When a point broke, it was reworked. When a tool dulled, it was even the flakes, the discarded remnants of tool-making, served as sharp blades for lesser tasks. Nothing was meaningless. Everything had purpose. And perhaps that is what the Clovis point truly represents, not simply a weapon, but a worldview, a way of seeing the world in raw form and knowing how to shape it gently with intention. In our age of noise and speed, it is difficult to imagine the stillness required for such work, the meditative patience, the subtle listening to stone. But the Clovis knew it well. It was their inheritance, passed not by word, but by demonstration, by the gentle hand of an elder guiding the hand of a child. This lineage of skill stretches backward like a trail through snow. Even the act of sourcing stone was a journey. The Clovis sought out only the finest materials, high-quality chert, jasper, and obsidian, carried sometimes hundreds of miles from their origin. Did they trade for it with other wandering bands beneath the wide sky? Did they return to sacred places, year after year, to harvest the ancient stone? Where the stone was found, the people followed. One site in particular whispers of such devotion. At the gold site in Texas, archaeologists uncovered layer upon layer of stone tools, flakes, and debited thousands upon thousands of pieces, shaped by human hands. A place of teaching, perhaps a sacred workshop beneath the sun. They're buried beneath the dust of time. The language of stone still sings. We cannot translate it in the modern sense. There are no nouns or verbs, no stories etched in sequence. But in the shape of a point, in the curve of a blade, there is memory. And memory is the oldest language of all. Imagine, if you will, a moment of silence around the fire. A Clovis woman draws a line in the dirt, showing her daughter how the fluting must flow. The girl watches, her eyes reflecting the stars. Later she will try. Her fingers will fumble. The stone will crack, but she will try again and again, until one day, her blade sings as the others once did. Through such repetition, a world is built. Not in temples, but in camps beside rivers. Not in palaces, but in gatherings beneath trees. The Clovis were not builders of monuments, but builders of continuity, and that is its own kind of permanence. Though their homes have vanished, their stories remain embedded in the earth, awaiting rediscovery. Each point unearthed by a modern hand is a verse from a poem written 10,000 years ago. And what does that poem say? Perhaps it says, "We were here." Perhaps it says, "We listened." Perhaps it says nothing at all, and simply sings the beauty of living in harmony with the land. Tonight, as you rest in the quietude of thought, imagine yourself napping stone beneath a glacial sky, the cold wind in your hair, the mammoth's distant trumpeting in your ears, the voice of the stone in your hands. And in that stillness, may you hear the Clovis speak once more. Breathe slowly now, dreamer. Let the winds of time carry you further back, beyond memory, beyond the noise of our modern world, into a land not tamed by machines or maps, a land still dreaming in its wildness, still ruled not by men, but by giants. For the world of the Clovis was not our world. It pulsed with a different rhythm, a deeper, older song, one sung by the tread of mammoths, the roar of ancient lions, and the silent drift of towering herds beneath endless sky. The Ice Age, and the Clovis walked among its giants. Picture the horizon stretching wide and blue, the prairie grass bows beneath the wind, undisturbed by fences or fields. From the edge of a wooded rise, a Clovis scout watches, still as the stones he carries. In the distance, a mammoth herd moves like living hills, massive bodies, cloaked in shaggy warmth, their tusks gleaming like ivory crescents in the low sun. Each step they take hums with the weight of ages. The Clovis knew these creatures not as beasts of fear, but as companions in survival, their lives intertwined, each shaping the path of the other. The mammoth gave meat, hide, bone, sinew. The Clovis gave reverence, skill. Daz was not a relationship of domination, but of deep, ancestral necessity. And the mammoth was not alone. Across the continent, strange and wondrous beings were the mastodon, more compact, with tusks that curled tightly like question marks written into the snow. The glyptodon, an armored behemoth, like a walking fortress of bone. The giant ground sloth, slow and solemn, pulling branches down with claws that curved like crescent moons. There were horses, though unlike the horses we know, stockier, wilder, native to these lands long before they disappeared. Camels, too, tall and soft-eyed, wandering deserts that would one day become farmland. And bison, enormous and ancient, their horns wide as outstretched arms. The Clovis did not live apart from these beings. They shared the land, the seasons, the stories. Imagine now a hunt, not a scene of violence, but of ritual. A group of Clovis hunters, quiet as snowfall, move through the tall grass. They carry spears tipped with fluted points. Their faces are painted with ochre. Their breath is steady. They know the terrain, the winds, the curve of the land. They know the mammoth to its patterns, its path, its pauses. The hunt is not always successful. The earth does not promise abundance. But when the moment comes, when the beast turns, and the spears fly, it is done with reverence, with AOI, and afterward a circle forms. The fire crackles. The meat is shared. The bones are shaped into tools, the sinew stretched into thread. Nothing is wasted, nothing forgotten. The children learn by watching. The elders teach by silence. In this way, knowledge passes not in lectures, but in presence. In their world, everything was larger, not just the animals, but the scale of life itself. The sky, unbroken by towers. The rivers, untamed by dams. The nights, truly dark, where stars spilled across the heavens like spilled grain. And beneath that sky, the Clovis moved like spirits hunting, gathering, making, singing. They left no great cities, no carved stones bearing names, but they left something far more enduring. A way of being, one of slowness, of deep listening, of awareness. To survive among the giants required humility. One could not command the land, only follow its signs. The Clovis read tracks in the mud, shifts in birdsong, patterns in the movement of clouds. Their wisdom was born not from conquest, but from communion. And in that communion, they were rich. We often measure a culture by its monuments, but what if we measure it by attention, by harmony? By that standard, the Clovis were among the most refined, for they knew when to move, when to stay, when to strike, when to watch. And through it all, the giants moved around them, through them, like living myths. But even myths must end. The giants are gone now. Extinction came not with fanfare, but with quiet grief. One by one, the mammoths fell. The mastodons vanished. The saber-toothed cats no longer crouched in shadow. What caused their departure? We do not know. Some say the climate shifted too quickly, as the younger Dryas brought sudden cold. Others whisper that the Clovis themselves, in their hunts, tipped the balance. Still others point to disease, or to a convergence of many threads. But this story is not about endings. It is about presence. And in the world the Clovis knew, the giants lived. The land breathed beneath their feet. The sky bowed over their heads. And every fluted point, every napped blade, is a reminder that humans once lived not apart from nature, but within it. Not as rulers, but as listeners. Tonight, as you close your eyes, let the world of giants rise once more. Feel the tremble of mammoth footsteps in the earth. Hear the wind rustling through saber-toothed grass. Smell the smoke of an ancient fire curling toward a starlit sky. You are not separate from this world. You are returning to it. Let the breath slow, let the night deepen. In the hush of ancient time, the hunt was not merely the taking of life, it was a sacred pact, a quiet conversation between creature and human, earth and spirit, bone and breath. For the Clovis, the act of hunting was not an act of greed, nor sport, but of reverent necessity, a dance as old as time, performed beneath the endless gaze of sky. They did not write prayers in books or carve them in temple walls. Their offerings were made in movement, in stillness, in the careful shaping of stone. Their worship was the hunt itself, its patience, its silence, its risk. Imagine the cold light of morning across a frozen plain. The world is still, save for the faint rustle of wind over grass. A group of Clovis hunters gathers, faces painted with earth. Each carries a spear, its point fluted with care. Their eyes are solemn, not from fear, but from the weight of what is to come. The hunt is a ceremony. They do not speak, they do not laugh. Their minds are focused, not on conquest, but on harmony. They know that to take from the earth, one must ask. That to strike true, one must wait. That to survive, one must honor. The animals they hunt are not enemies. They are kin, older and wiser. The mammoth, the bison, the caribou thieves are not trophies. They are teachers. There are stories, perhaps now forgotten, that the first mammoth gave itself willingly to feed the first clan. That it lay down beneath a sky of fire and told the people where to strike, how to divide, what to do with each piece, whether truth or dream. The Clovis remembered. After the hunt, there is no celebration. There is silence, a silence filled with gratitude, with ritual. The animal is approached with care. The blood is caught, the hide preserved, the bones carried back. The heart, perhaps, is burned in a small fire, a gift to the unseen forces, a whisper of thanks. Nothing is wasted, nothing is forgotten. And later at the fire, the clan gathers. The flames flicker in the night, casting shadows that stretch and bend. Stories are not told loudly, but passed in gesture, in quiet tones, in the slow retelling of old paths. Children listen with wide eyes, learning the names of stars and rivers, the tracks of elk, the dangers of ice. The fire becomes a teacher. Here, Decisions are made without command. There are no rulers, no kings, only elders, whose wisdom comes not from power, but from memory. The Clovis lived in bands, loosely knit, the maker of tools, the gatherer of roots, the speaker to animals, the watcher of sky. Their unity was not enforced, but understood. And around the fire, that unity glowed. It is tempting to romanticize, to imagine a perfect harmony. But the Clovis life was not easy. It was fragile, precious, tested. Storms came. Prey vanished, ice returned. But through it all, they endured not with arrogance, but with adaptability. The sacred hunt taught them to bend, not break. And in their bending, they survived. Even in the act of making camp, there was ritual. A place was chosen not just for shelter, but for its spirit. The direction of the wind, the curve of the trees, the whisper of water nearby, all were signs. All were listened to. Tents were made of hide, stretched tight with sinew, held firm with bones. Hearths were dug with care. The stones around the fire were placed with intention. And at night, the clan would sleep close, breathing in rhythm, as the stars circled above. There are sites scattered now like old dreams where archaeologists have found these hearth pits blackened with ancient soot, arrangements of stone that hinted order, scraps of hide, the charred edge of a spear, and always the points, those silent, fluted messages from the past. Each one tells us that someone knelt here. Someone watched the fire die. Someone whispered to the dawn. We cannot know their names. We cannot hear their songs. But we can listen deeply to what remains, to the hush after the hunt, to the warmth of the flame, to the knowledge carried not in books, but in bone. There is wisdom here, quiet and immense. In a world that demands speed and spectacle, the Clovis remind us of another way, a slower way, a way of watching, waiting, honoring. So tonight, in your own stillness, imagine the fire. Let its light flicker across your mind. Hear the soft breath of a child curled against fur. Feel the cold air just beyond the tent's edge. Smell the faint sweetness of wood smoke rising into sky. You are there. You have always been there. For the sacred hunt and the silent fire belong not to one people, but to all who remember how to listen. In the quiet dawn of prehistory, where words had yet to find form and memory traveled only by wind and breath, a strange innovation emerged. It was elegant. It was precise. It was mysterious. The Clovis point, as we have whispered before, was unlike anything made before it. But one feature, more than any other, has stood wonder in the hearts of archaeologists, artisans, and dreamers alike. The flute. This flute was not a sound, not a melody drifting through air, but a groove, a long, narrow channel flaked from the base of the point upward, as if the tool itself had been opened like a path through stone. Why? That is the question that hums through the millennia. It is believed that this flute served a purpose to help haft the point more securely to a wooden spear shaft. The groove may have allowed binding to sit flush, for the spear to fly truer, to strike with greater force and stability. But if it were merely utility, why such beauty? Why such risk? For the flute is not easily made. To carve one is to flirt with failure. One wrong strike, and the entire point fractures, rendering it useless. The flint knapper must hold their breath, must trust their hand in the stone. They must know the core of their material like a singer knows pitch. To flute a point is to walk the edge of ruin, and yet they did it, again and again. Across thousands of miles, in hundreds of sites, we find them Clovis points, fluted with care, each one a whisper from a vanished time. Why would a people take such a risk? Some say it was merely function. Others believe the flute held deeper meaning. Perhaps it was a signature of mastery, a mark that said, this was made with skill, with patience, with heart. Or perhaps it was spiritual, a channel through which breath or spirit flowed, binding the point to its purpose, connecting human to animal, earth to sky. Was the flute a symbolic wound, an offering carved into stone, or a practical innovation that became, over generations, a rite of passage? There are no answers carved in certainty, but the mystery itself is a kind of gift. For in that unanswered question, the Clovis remain alive. Let us imagine now a flint knapper at work. He sits alone, on a hill overlooking a river that snakes through the grasslands like memory. The sun is low, the wind is still. He holds a rough blank in his hand, its surface smooth and cool. He studies its angles, sees its hidden lines. He is not guessing, he is remembering. The blows fall in rhythm, first the shaping, then thinning. The edge sharpens, the form emerges. Hours pass, the air cools, and finally, the flute. He sets the bass against his thigh, lifts his pressure flaker. He breathes deeply. His thumb presses into the groove. Steady and slow. There is no margin for error. A whisper of force, a channel of blossoms, and when he holds it to the sky, the last light of day gleams in the groove, as if the sun itself were honoring the work. That point will feed his people who will fly, swift and true, and long after he is gone, it may rest in the earth, waiting for hands in the distant future to lift it once more. That is the mystery of the flute, not what it was, but what it meant. In our world, tools are made to be discarded, used and forgotten, but the Clovis point, fluted and eternal, was made to endure. It carried more than purpose. It carried meaning. Perhaps, when the hunt was over and the animal had fallen, the hunters would return to camp and lay the fluted point upon the earth, beside the fire. And perhaps, in a moment of silence, they would remember the strike, the breath, the balance. Not to boast, but to give thanks. The flute, like a scar, marked the blade as something sacred. Even now, when we hold them in museums, behind glass and shadow, they sing. Not in notes, but in presence. We stand before them in silence, and the silence is full. The Clovis did not leave scrolls or sculptures, but they left us the flute. Not a sound, but a shape. Not a song, but a whisper. Tonight, as you lie beneath your own sky, far from those ancient plains, let your breath move like wind through stone. Let your thoughts wander the groove of time, and listen not with ears, but with wonder. For in the mystery of the flute, the Clovis still breathe gently now, dreamer, for we have entered the twilight of their tale. The Clovises, silent artisans of stone, these wanderers beneath ancient skies burned brightly across the vast continent. Their fluted points appeared in layers of earth, from the Rockies to the Gulf, from the Great Lakes to the high desert mesas, a presence both widespread and then, just as mysteriously they were gone, not vanished in a single cataclysm, but in a soft, quiet fading. Their signature tools ceased to appear. Their craftsmanship no longer echoed in the stone. The flute, once an emblem of their spirit, disappeared from the archaeological record. Why? It is one of the greatest enigmas of prehistory. To understand this vanishing, we must first understand the fragility of their world. The Clovis lived at the end of an age. The ice age was dying, the earth was shifting. The great glaciers that once covered much of the northern continent were retreating, melting, releasing vast floods and altering entire ecosystems. Where once had been grassland, now rose new forests. Where mammoths had wandered, now there were deer. The world was changing, faster than the pace of oral memory. Perhaps the Clovis could not adapt. Perhaps their way of life, so deeply attuned to the rhythms of the megafauna, could not survive in a world where those giants vanished. And vanish they did. The mammoth, the mastodon, the giant sloth, the horse, the camel, the short-faced bear, the saber-toothed cat, all gone within a few short centuries. Some say it was the warming climate, abrupt and unforgiving, that felled them. Others believe disease played a role, strange, silent illnesses introduced across time or space. And there are those who claim that human hunting tipped the balance. But the truth may lie, as it so often does, in the space between. The Clovis, it seems, were born into a world of abundance and died into a world of scarcity. But death is not disappearance. What if they did not vanish, but simply changed? What if, like river water shifting course, they flowed into new forms, new traditions, new tools, new names? After Clovis, other technologies arise: Folsom, Dalton, and many more, each with its own form, its own rhythm. These two whisper of people watching, hunting, adapting. Perhaps they were the descendants of the Clovis, still moving, still remembering. The change in tools may mark a change in thought, a change in land, a change in life itself. We must be careful not to speak of disappearance when what we mean is transformation. The Clovis may have faded as a style, but not as a people. They lived on in the bloodlines of those who followed, in the stories that were never written down, in the campsites left beside new rivers, under new stars. And yet, the mystery lingers. There is no grave for the Clovis culture, no last monument, no collapse to mark the end. Their passing is a mist, soft and ungraspable, and perhaps that is the way it must be. For not all stories end with thunder. Some end like dusk, slowly, silently, as light slips into memory. Tonight, let us walk with them once more, on the edge of their age. The last mammoth roams a far valley. The last flute is struck in stone. The wind has turned. The fires burn lower. A Clovis child looks up at the stars, unaware she is the last to carry a name we will later give. She does not mourn. She listens. Because to the Clovis the world was not made of endings, but of movement. They had no calendars, no clocks, no sense of finality, only seasons, stars, and the silence that comes before change. Their vanishing is not an absence. It is a passage, a door opening to a world unknown. So let us not say goodbye. Let us walk quietly beside them, as they fade into the mist of deep time. Let us honor the silence they left behind, not with noise, but with stillness. Let the stars return, let the stones rest, and let the memory of the Clovis be carried, not as a riddle to solve, but as a dream to keep. Drift gently now, as if descending through soft earth, through centuries of silence, into the deeper sediment of memory. For the story of the Clovis does not lie upon the surface. It is buried, subtle, layered, like a secret whispered in the dark and then folded into the folds of the world. Their presence endures not in ruins or writings, but in the strata of the soil. Archaeology is the art of listening to time, and when archaeologists dig, they do not merely seek objects. They seek stories, stories compressed beneath our feet, sealed by wind, rain, and the slow, unbroken breath of the earth. In the quiet of excavation, the Clovis begin to read. Their tools lie within layers of loam and clay, often meters beneath where our modern lives unfold. No longer in use, but still perfectly shaped, as if waiting, as if watching. Time, it seems, has not warned them. The earth has kept them safe. Imagine the brush of a gloved hand sweeping across stone, a glint, the shape of a fluted point, untouched by human eyes for 10,000 years. In that moment, the archaeologist holds more than stone. They hold a moment of life, a gesture frozen in deep time, a single decision to strike here, not there, preserved across millennia. That is the power of what lies beneath. And yet it is not only the tools that matter. There are campfires, reduced to circles of ash and stone, midden heaps, where bones and shells reveal ancient diets, even footprints, sometimes pressed into clay that hardened beneath the sun and was then buried by wind and rain. Each layer tells a chapter, and the Clovis layer is like a whisper between epic, too deep for the recent, too shallow for the truly ancient, a narrow band where evidence sings of movement, of presence, of a people who understood the rhythm of a changing world. One such place is the Blackwater Draw site, near Clovis, New Mexico, the cradle of the name. There, beneath layers of sediment, mammoth bones and fluted points lay side by side, sealed together in the hush of history. When they were first uncovered in the 1930s, they stunned the world. For here was proof that humans had walked this land long before we had imagined. Not just walked, but thrived, hunted, shaped, dreamed. From that moment, the story of the Clovis took root, and yet it remained elusive. For every point uncovered, there are 100 questions unasked. For every site found, 1,000 remain untouched. The earth holds more than we can imagine, and the deeper we go, the stranger the story becomes. Sites like Galt, Topper, Meadowcroft teach offers new mysteries. Some reveal pre-Clovis tools, suggesting others came before. Others show signs of continuous habitation, long after Clovis tools had vanished. What does this mean? Did the Clovis absorb the old? Did they become the new? Were they a people or a moment? The soil does not answer. It only reveals, and we, dreamers of the present, must learn to read its language, a language of pollen and ash, of bones and charcoal, of silence. There is humility in the layers. For every discovery, there are limits: a missing camp, a flood-swept hearth, a point cracked beyond recognition. Time does not yield all its secrets. It chooses what to preserve, what to erase. But the Clovis somehow endure, not in numbers, not in names, but in patterns. The careful curve of a point, the specific choice of stone, the echo of their presence, and the placement of a tool beside the bones of a mammoth. It is enough. For in that fragment, we find connection. We realize that the past is not lost. It is layered, waiting. And so tonight, as your mind drifts deeper, imagine the earth not as solid, but as soft, not as mute, but as listening. Beneath your feet, beneath your home, beneath the roads and roots and rivers, lies memory. Memory compressed into stone. And somewhere down there, hidden in the layers, the Clovis still walk. They bend to gather They watch the herd from behind the hill. They strike fire from flint. They whisper into a night that never truly ends. For time is not a line, but a spiral. And within its turnings, we find the ancient, resting just beneath the surface. Close your eyes now and listen, not with ears, but with presence. Hear the echo of fluted stone pressed into soil. Hear the silence after the last footstep fades. Though the Clovis people left no books, no scrolls, no names etched in granite, their presence was carried by wind and buried by time. Their legacy lies not in monuments, but in the subtle, persistent echo of form. A fluted point here, a campsite there, an obsidian blade nestled in sand where once a river sang. These echoes stretch across a continent, from the high plains of Montana to the sandy shores of the Carolinas, from the dry canyons of Arizona to the limestone hills of Texas. Their points appear in the dust of New Mexico and the marshes of Florida, and even in the depths of caves where daylight never lingers. A presence both vast and precise. How did they spread so far? Not with chariots, not with sails, but with time, with footsteps, with a slow, ancient rhythm of movement. The Clovis bands, small and kin-bound, moved like weather system, always listening, always following. Their path was shaped by water, by prey, by the pull of the stars. They carried with them the memory of tools, the knowledge of fire, the stories whispered from elder to child. And so, their patterns repeat. The same fluted point appears, in slightly different form, across thousands of miles. Each one an echo, each one a voice from the stillness. Yet within this unity, there was also variation. Different regions show different choices of stone, slight shifts in form, a preference for local materials, adaptations to new environments. In the forests, lighter tools, near rivers polished stones, on the plains, the long, elegant spears, fit for bringing down the mammoth. This is not contradiction. It is adaptation. It shows a people aware, responsive, alive to place. Their echo was not one of conquests, but of a two. They did not build cities to shape the land, but shaped themselves to fit its breathing. They did not move in lines, but in spirals, loops, seasonal returns. They came to a place not to tame it, but to learn from it, and in doing so, they left a mark far deeper than walls or roads. They left the memory of how to move with the land. Even today, the echoes remain. In archaeological maps, we see the constellation of Clovis sites sparkle across the continent like stars, each one a point of contact, a heartbeat in the soil, a place where someone knelt to strike stone, to skin hide, to whisper into flame. And just as stars are separated by great silence, so too are these sites. But between them, we feel the invisible thread, a network of knowledge, a lineage of hands. Perhaps they met in gatherings. Perhaps they exchanged gift stone from distant places, stories from other hunts, feathers from unseen birds. We do not know, but the repetition of form suggests connection, a shared way of seeing, a shared dream. There is something deeply human in this. To find a Clovis point in a cave, and then find another, nearly identical, hundreds of miles away, this is not coincidence. This is memory in motion. This is how a people speaks across time, not with volume but with clarity. And so we listen, not with shovels alone, but with reverence. For every point unearthed is a bridge between worlds, between now and then, between us and them. And though we may never know the names of these people, we know their presence, we know their intention, we know the careful shaping of edge and form, and the deep patience that lies within. The echoes, when gathered, begin to form a song, a low, slow song, sung across the entire expanse of the ancient continent. A song without words, but full of knowing. And it tells us this: we were here, we moved with care, we listened to the land. Tonight, dreamer, may that song rise in your heart. Let it drift across your thoughts like wind over prairie. Let it settle like dust upon your bones. For you, too, are part of this continent. You, too, move across its ancient breath. And when you walk beneath stars, remember, the Clovis walked here, too, and their echo walks still. Let the darkness deepen now, and allow the hush of deep time to draw near. In the hands of the Clovis, stone was not merely a tool. It was a companion, a witness, a silent partner in the great unfolding of life beneath the ancient sky. There was something sacred in the act of shaping it, something that transcended function. The blade was not just for the hunt. It was a vessel for intention, a form where spirit and survival became one. The Clovis did not name their points as we do. They did not call them artifacts, technologies, or projectiles. These are words we place upon them. But to the Clovis, each point may have carried breath, memory, meaning, each one, a quiet prayer cast in flint. There is a spirit in stone, if one is willing to see. To nap a point is to remove what is unnecessary, to see within the raw material the form that wishes to emerge. It is not a forcing, but a listening, a dance of hand and edge, a harmony of patience and precision. The Clovis knew this dance well. Imagine a woman, older, her fingers weathered and strong, seated beneath a tree as wind stirs the grass. She holds a piece of obsidian in her lap. Beside her, a young boy watches silently. He does not interrupt. He knows this moment is not for questions. She begins. The first strikes remove the bulk. Then the shape begins to emerge, a long, gentle curve, balanced on either side. The edge sharpens, the weight shifts. The boy leans forward. Now, the flute, with the tip of a deer antler, she presses into the base. Slowly, firmly, the stone sings beneath her touch. A thin flake peels away, revealing the groove within. It is done. She holds it to the light, and something ancient gleams. To the boy, it is not just a weapon. It is magic. For the Clovis, the crafting of stone was not divorced from the sacred. The material itself mattered. Obsidian, glassy and dark, may have been favored for its sharpness, yes, but also for its beauty, its mystery. Chert, often banded with color, shimmered with hidden patterns. Jasper, deep red like blood, echoed the life it would help sustain. Each stone held its own spirit. Each flake removed was a release, and perhaps, after shaping the tool, a small rite was performed. A touch of ochre, a word whispered to the wind, a moment of stillness before the point was tied to a shaft and carried into the hunt. These are things we cannot prove, but we can feel them. Archaeologists sometimes speak of use, whether tiny scratches, polish and scars left on tools by their time in the world. But what of soul wear? What of the energy placed into the object at its birth? The Clovis may not have separated the physical from the spiritual. To them, stone and sky, beast and breath, were part of the same living whole. There was no need to divide, no need to explain, only to honor. This reverence may be why they returned to certain places, quarries where the best stone could be found. Sites like the Inhabitants flint quarries in Texas, where rich, banded flint lies exposed in the hills. They dug into the earth, carefully removing the raw material they would shape into life. Such places were more than resource. They were sacred sites, not marked by temples, but by memory. Perhaps songs were sung there, or silence was kept, or offerings were left. A broken blade, a carved bone, a strand of hair. We will never know, but the earth remembers. And in that remembering, the Clovis endure. They remind us that to create is to connect, that even the smallest object can carry the weight of the infinite, that a point of stone, struck and shaped beneath the open sky, can hold the same mystery as a galaxy. There is spirit in the stone, and in recognizing that, we begin to return not to the Clovis, but to ourselves. Tonight, as your thoughts float like ash from a quiet fire, picture a single point, a blade held by hands long gone, carried through forests, across plains, beside rivers that have since changed their course, buried, forgotten, found, held now in your mind. Let it rest there. Let it speak in silence. And hear, beneath its edge, the murmur of all that came before. Let your breath grow soft, your body still. We return now to the edge of the fire, to the place where warmth meets shadow, and the past glows faintly in the embers. Here, beneath the stars that never change, the Clovis tended the three great elements of their world: fire, bone, and memory. Each one a gift, each one a thread through the darkness of time. Fire was more than warmth. It was life itself. In a world without metal, without electricity, without shelter beyond what hands could build, fire was the center of the world. It offered protection from beasts that prowled the night. It lit the faces of elders telling stories to wide-eyed children. It cooked the meat, dried the hides, tempered the stone. But fire, too, was sacred, a living being that had to be watched, fed, respected. To let it die was to court cold, to invite silence. The Clovis likely kept fire near always, carried embers from place to place in hollowed wood or wrapped in moss. When they arrived at a new camp, they kindled not a blaze of conquest, but a gentle continuation, a reawakening of the flame's breath. And around it they gathered. At night, the fire spoke when all else was still. The flickering light made shadows dance on the skins of the tents, on the stone tools resting nearby, on the faces of those who remembered. It was here that memory lived, not in written form, but in smoke, in voice, in ritual. Stories were spoken into fire, not to be preserved, but to be felt. And bone was not waste. It was not something to cast aside. To the Clovis, bone was material, medicine, memory. The bones of great beasts, mammoth, bison, deer, were used for tools, for needles, for awls, for handles and beads. But more than that, they were reminders, symbols, the remnants of a life taken and honored. Some bones were carved, some were polished, some were arranged beside the dead or buried beneath the ash of the hearth. They told of the animus size, of the hunt, of the hunger that followed and the fullness that came. A mammoth femur was not just a limb, it was a monument, a story in calcium and time. Even human bones perhaps were kept with reverence, not displayed, but remembered, buried with care, cradled in ochre, set beneath stone. We have found few Clovis burials. The soil does not preserve all, but those that remain speak of great attention. A child laid to rest with points beside him, ochre dusted upon the small body, a farewell, soft and sacred. In bone, they preserved not just the flesh of life, but the breath of memory. And memory, I dream a memory was everything. Without writing, without walls, without statues to outlast the wind, the Clovis held their history in a different form, in repetition, in the way a tool was made, in the way a song was sung beside the river each spring, in the way stories passed from one breath to another, each time slightly changed, slightly shaped, like a stone in the stream. Memory was held in rhythm, the same stars overhead, the same trail through the hills, the same place where mammoths came to drink, and where the clan once found enough to eat for many days. These were their libraries, and fire, bone, and memory were their books. The fire warmed the story, the bone held its weight, the memory gave it life. And so, the Clovis endured, not in empires, not in monuments, but in the fragile, powerful breath of what was passed down. Let us sit with them now, in that circle of flame. Hear the hush after the tail ends. See the child fall asleep with a stone tool clutched in his small hand. See the mother stare into the embers, remembering her own mother's voice, and her mother's before that. It is quiet. Only the fire speaks. Only the memory glows. And as you rest tonight, let your dreams be shaped by that same warmth. Let the bones of thought rest beside the flame of sleep. For the Clovis did not vanish. They entered the fire. They remain in the bone. And they speak, still, in the soft rhythm of memory. Drift gently now, deeper into the earth's long breath. The soil beneath us is not mute. It remembers. Each layer is a page, each grain a letter, each silence a pause in the story of time. To those who know how to listen, the soil is a scroll, and in its ancient lines, the Clovis still write. Their presence is not always bold. There are no towering ruins, no buried cities, but in the dust of riverbeds, in the folds of ancient terraces, in the gentle swell of forgotten valleys, their signs endure. A fluted point in the sand, a concentration of flakes, a dark stain where fire once burned. These are their messages. Subtle patient, unfolding only two hands that move with care. Archaeologists, those seekers of memory, know this language well. They do not rush. They kneel, they brush, they wait. With every scrape of trawl, every sift of sieve, they come closer to a breath from another time. One such place is the gold site in central Texas. There, beneath the hill country's quiet green, lies a deep well of memory. For generations, people came to this place, not only Clovis, but those before and after. They came to quarry stone, to shape tools, to rest. Layer upon layer of activity, pressed down by time. Within the Clovis layer, thousands of flakes, cores, and finished points speak of an intimate relationship with the land. This was not just a hunting ground, it was a home. Nearby, small features hinted daily life, hearths lined with stone, concentrations of ochre, the burned remains of plant material, each one a whisper, each one a hand reaching up from the soil. Other sites echo the same. At Ansic, in Montana, a Clovis burial unlike any other, the body of a child, no more than 2 years old, wrapped in red ochre, laid to rest with over 100 stone tools, points, blades, antler rods, all made with care. This is not the burial of the forgotten, this is memory, held in sacredness. What does it tell us? That even in a world where survival was hard, the Clovis honored the young, that the passage of life into death was marked, was seen, was felt, that their sorrow, like ours, was part of being human. In South Carolina, at the Topper site, some believe they found signs even older than Clovis, tools beneath tools, time beneath time. And so the soil keeps revealing, not all at once, never in clarity, but slowly, like fog lifting from a river. We may never find their homes in the way we seek them, no walls, no roads, but we find their choices, their camps on high ground, near water, their caches of tools, buried with intention, their quiet signs of returned charcoal beneath fresh soil, as if they came back to the same places, again and again, in rhythm with the seasons. This was their architecture, not of stone, but of memory, not of buildings, but of movement, and the soil records it all. It records the footprints pressed into clay that hardened under a sun that still shines. It records the layers of ash, where countless fires burned and warmed those who laughed and listened. It records the bones of beasts long gone, split for marrow by hands whose names we do not know. The soil keeps the secret, but it does not hide it. It waits for those who approach with reverence, and when we listen not with greed, but with stillness, we begin to hear the story not just of the Clovis, but of the earth itself. For the Clovis were of the land, not above it. Their tools came from its belly. Their fires burned upon its skin. Their bodies returned to its embrace. And so tonight, as your body rests upon the softness of your bed, imagine the soil not as dead matter, but as memory, alive, awake, waiting. And somewhere beneath it, the signs remain. Tiny fluted points. Ash from a forgotten fire. A child's ochre-stained bone. Each one a syllable in a language we are still learning to speak. Each one a star in the buried sky of time. Sink now, dear dreamer, into the deep quiet of origin. For there is a space and time not marked by years or reigns, not by kings or battles, but by presence, by breath, by footsteps so ancient they fall outside the edge of memory. This is not history as we know it. This is something older. This is the dream time of the continent, a term whispered from the spirit worlds of other ancient peoples, far across oceans, but still resonant higher among the rivers and grasslands and ice-shadowed peaks that the Clovis once called home. The Clovis moved through this land as if through a great dream. Every stone, every beast, every star above their heads was part of a vast web, a living, breathing reality where matter and spirit were not separate, where landscape and story were one. To cross a mountain range was not simply a journey. It was a passage through memory. To drink from a stream was to touch the same water touched by the ancestors. To watch the mammoth pass was to witness the walking presence of a sacred being. This dream time was not fantasy. It was truth of a different kind, a truth carried in the body, in rhythm, in cycles, in repetition. The Clovis did not look upon the land and see resources. They saw signs. They saw messages in the pattern of clouds, in the migration of birds, in the bloom of flowers after the snow. The continent, then, was not a stage, it was a being, alive, responsive, holy, and the Clovis, in turn, lived gently upon it. They did not try to conquer this dream. They entered it, listened to it, danced within it. Their migrations were part of the land's breath. Their camps were pauses, not impositions. Their tools, shaped from the bones of the earth, returned to it after use. In this way, they moved with reverence. They knew the seasons not by dates, but by sensations. The way the wind changed at the mouth of a canyon, the way the moon rose slightly differently as the herds turned north, the song of frogs after the silence before the snow. Their knowledge was not written, but held in the muscle, in the eye, in the footfall upon moss. This dreamtime is long past from the world of cities and clocks, but it lingers. In the forests still wild, in the rivers that still remember, and in the old stone points, buried and sleeping, like thoughts once dreamed in waiting to return. It is easy to forget that we are also of this continent, that our bones carry echoes of the same wind, that the stardust in our breath is the same as in theirs. But in the quiet and the slow hours of night, it returns. We feel the hush of something older than language, and we begin to walk softly into memory. Picture now a Clovis band at dawn. They move with care, their feet wrapped in hide, their breath visible in the cold. The light touches the tops of trees. Mist calls off the river. There is no rush. Each step matters. Each bird call is noted. Each direction is considered not by compass, but by spirit. They follow paths not marked by trail, but by knowing. And when they stop to rest, to cook, to dream, it is not a camp, it is communion. With the trees, with the sky, with the spirits that linger just at the edge of vision. This is how they lived. Not in a dream, but as part of one. And perhaps that is the gift they leave us. Not a monument, but a memory. That the world itself is sacred. That to walk upon it is to participate in its becoming. And that in slowness, in listening, in stillness, we can return. We do not need to find fluted points or ancient bones to reach the Clovis. We need only walk beneath the stars, as they did. We need only feel the wind and know that we, too, are part of the land's long dream. And so tonight, as you drift into sleep, let yourself fall into the dream time of the continent. Let the stars blur. Let the grass sway. Let the mammoth rise once more from the fog of memory. You are not alone. You never were. For the Clovis walks still, not in body, but in the sacred hush between heartbeat and breath. Breathe softly now, as though listening to voices that no longer speak in words. For in the world of the Clovis, there were no written histories, no painted portraits to preserve the lines of a face. Yet memory flowed like a river, carried through the most ancient of vessels, elders and children. The elders, those who remembered the long winters and the rare abundance of spring, held the thread of continuity, not as rulers, but as keepers. Their hair, streaked with ashen years, bore the scent of campfires that had burned for generations. Their eyes held the patience of stone. They were the library of the people, and the children wild-limbed, curious, unburdened by the frost of age-worth. They asked not with speech alone, but with gesture, with mimicry, with a soft stillness of watching. Between them stretched the span of time, braided not by ink, but by presence. Picture a scene now beneath the canopy of pine and morning mist. A grandfather, his back curved by the rhythm of 1,000 steps, sits beside the river, shaping stone. His hands are sure, even in age, not from strength but from familiarity. He does not teach in lessons, he teaches in silence and movement, in allowing the child beside him barefoot, wide-eyed, to sit and watch. The boy sees the rhythm of the flake, he sees the breath drawn before each strike, he sees the humility before the stone, and slowly, over seasons, over years, he will begin to understand. This is how memory was passed, not in a rush, but in rhythm. Elders carried not just knowledge, but ways of seeing. They remembered the path through the mountains where the wind changed in mid. They remembered the shape of the herd's track after the first snowfall. They remembered the taste of berries that only grew on the south side of the hills. This memory was not stored, it lived. And children learned not only facts, but feeling. They learned the pulse of the earth beneath bare feet. They learned how to wait, how to listen for the crack in a branch that meant deer, how to hear the silence that meant snow was near. The Clovis had no schools. They had presence, they had stories. Around the fire, in the long twilight, elders would speak, their voices low, their words slow, not to entertain but to root, to remind. They told of hunts gone wrong and right, of places where the land spoke, of dreams that warned of danger or pointed toward bounty. And children listened, not always with full attention. Some would drift, watching the sparks rise into the sky, but something remained alive. A rhythm, a fragment. It would return years later, when the same path opened, or the same wind stirred. The Clovis way of life did not need permanence. It needed transmission, and the elders were its bridge. They knew they would not last. They did not need to. What mattered was the child who would one day shape the same stone, light the same fire, see the same stars. This, perhaps, is the greatest story of all. That even in a world of uncertainty, of cold winters and lost trails, of vanished herds and changing skies, the Clovis did not despair. They passed on what they knew. They gave the child the tools, not just the physical ones, the spears and knives and fire starters, but the invisible ones: patience, wonder, listening. In doing so, they ensured not their own survival, but the survival of memory itself. And so when we find a Clovis point today, buried deep in the soil of time, we are not just finding a tool. We are touching a lesson passed from elder to child. We are holding a moment of learning, a memory made solid, a story with no author, and yet many voices. Tonight, as your breath deepens, imagine sitting beside that same fire, the embers low, the child resting, half asleep, the elder quiet eyes on the stars. Between them, nothing is said, but everything is understood. Let that silence fill you. Let it teach you how memory moves not in pages, but in presence. And in that stillness, may you remember the elders and the children who once lived with the same sky above them, the same earth below. Their world is gone, but their rhythm remains. Let your thoughts drift now toward the edge of the known. For every Clovis footstep, every campfire, every tool shaped from earth and intention was only part of a larger motion, a slow, deliberate reaching towards something unseen. They moved not in circles of containment, but in spirals of seeking. And always, always they followed the path beyond the horizon. The world of the Clovis was not confined. It had no borders carved in stone, no maps inked by cut. Their compass was the land itself, the sun's passage, the taste of wind, the call of distant geese. They followed what called them, a herd shifting toward the south, a familiar spring bubbling again after winter's sleep, the feel of a valley breathing beneath snow. And so they wandered, but not without meaning. To the Clovis, the unknown was not danger, it was invitation. Each new place was a conversation, each new bend in the river, a question, each new stretch of plains, an opening to be entered with care. Imagine them now, on the move. A small group, gathered beneath the first light of dawn, shoulders wrapped in fur, spears lashed to backs, children held close. Behind them, a camp grown quiet. Before them, a land that sleeps in mist. They do not move, they do not speak loudly. The land, waking, listens, and they listen in return. They do not know what waits. They do not need to. They know that the path is called, and so they answer. This rhythm of migration was not only practical, it was spiritual. The path beyond the horizon was more than terrain. It was trust. Trust in the land to provide, trust in their knowledge to guide, trust in the ancestors whose own paths still whispered through memory. The Clovis did not move out of fear. They moved out of participation. In the dance of seasons, in the turning of stars, in the longing all humans carry to find what lies just beyond the visible. This, perhaps, is the deepest thread we share with them. That hunger for distance, that pull toward the edge of understanding. We may now fly across continents in hours. We may gaze down at Earth from machines that circle it endlessly. And yet the mystery remains. The path beyond the horizon is still calling. We just no longer know how to listen. But the Clovis listened. They listened with their skin, with their breath, with their silence. They did not fear getting lost, for they were never separate from the world. They walked. Every new place became familiar through attention. Every unfamiliar valley became home through fire and memory. And in this movement, they were shaped. A new type of stone, a new way of hunting, a new rhythm of gathering. Always the land teaching, always the people listening, and then passing it on. The horizon moved with them. It was not a place, but a spirit, a presence always just ahead. And when they reached it, they found another. In this way, the Clovis crossed not just rivers and mountains, but time itself. They stitched together the continent, not with roads, but with memory, not with monuments, but with movement. And in doing so, they reminded us that the edge of knowing is never an end, but a beginning. Even now, as we uncover their points beneath our fields and deserts, we do not hold the final word. We hold only another beginning, another invitation to follow the mystery, to honor the silence, to seek, not to conquer, but to understand. Tonight, as you breathe with the stillness, feel that same horizon at the edge of your thoughts. It is not far. It is within you. The Clovis are there, walking slowly, listening, moving towards something sacred, and in following their path, so do we. Fall now into the gentle folds of forgetting, not the forgetting of neglect, but the forgetting that comes with time's soft touch, where what once was fades not from importance, but from clarity. For in the spaces left behind by the Clovis, we do not find ruins. We do not find temples or towers or walls swallowed by vines. We find absences, and in those absences, we find meaning. The Clovis left no written words, and yet their silence speaks. They built no cities, and yet their paths remain etched in stone and wind. Their world was one that moved lightly, gently, and what it left behind are not monuments, but traces shaped not by presence, but by absence. A hearth cold for 10,000 years. A scatter of flakes where hands once shaped the edge of a dream. A broken point, unfinished, left behind when the herd turned too quickly or the weather shifted too fast. These are the shapes of absence. They are not voids. They are outlined shadows of lives once lived. And like shadows, they hold form. We walk through landscapes they once knew intimately. A dry arroyo, once full of spring melt, may have quenched their thirst. A wide basin, now empty, may have echoed with their laughter. A hill, quiet now beneath sky, may have once been the place where an elder told the story of stars. And yet all of it is gone. The people, the fire, the rhythm. But something remains. Absence itself becomes artifact, not in what is seen, but in what is felt. For there is a weight in these empty places. A polar hush. When we stand where the Clovis once stood, we feel it. The way the wind curls differently across the stones. The way a tree grows, its roots wound around the past. The way the sky seems to lean closer. These are not accidents. These are memory in negative space. Archaeologists speak often of what they do not find. The campsites too ephemeral to leave a mark. The tools carried away. The bodies returned to the earth too gently to be preserved. But these, too, are part of the story. To live lightly is not to be forgotten. It is to be woven into the land so deeply that removal is impossible. Even in absence, the Clovis remain. They are the pause in the wind before dawn, the silence between the songs of birds, the feeling unspoken that you are not the first to stand here. And perhaps never alone. This is a different kind of legacy. One not made of stone stacked upon stone, but a breath within breath. Their story lingers in the choices we now make, to honor what came before, to walk softly, to remember the value of what cannot be seen. Tonight, let your thoughts rest in those hollows. Imagine standing in a clearing where the grass grows taller in one place, a place where a hearth once burned. No fire remains. No tools lie scattered. Only the shape of warmth, long extinguished. And yet it holds you. It holds us all. For absence is not the opposite of presence. It is the space that makes presence sacred. And in the shapes of absence the Clovis left, we find not loss, but invitation. To slow, to listen, to imagine, to remember not what was done, but how it was done, gently, fully, together. And so, as your thoughts drift toward stillness, let the shapes of absence become part of your dreaming. Let them guide you not into emptiness, but into reverence. And there, in the soft folds of time, the Clovis wait, not gone, simply returned. Let the air grow heavier now, as though the sky itself lowers with memory. In the language of the Clovis, which we do not know and may never understand, there may have been no word for time, not as we conceive it, not as hours stacked like stones, or calendars marked in numbered days. Their time flowed like rivers, circled like winds, returned like the seasons. Time was not something measured, it was something lived, and when the Clovis buried their dead, they spoke in the red dust of time. Ochre, the pigment of blood, of sunset, of the earth's first memory. Ground from stone, mixed with water or fat, it became a color of presence, a symbol of transformation. Across the ancient world, this sacred dust appears on bones, on tools, on walls of caves where hands pressed against stone in silent ritual. The Clovis were no different. At the Anzic site, buried beneath the soil of what is now Montana, a child lay with more than 100 tool spears, blades, antler rods all dusted in ochre, not scattered, not cast aside, but placed with care. Why, we do not know, but we can listen. The ochre speaks of meaning, of marking, of farewell. It says, this one mattered. It says, carry them gently into the place beyond names. Perhaps the ochre was the breath of the earth, returning to the body what once it gave. Perhaps it was protection, a shield against the chill of death. Perhaps it was memory coloring the child so they would not be forgotten. Even as the sky turned, and the world changed, and the stories faded, the Clovis used ochre not just in burials, but in life. Traces have been found on tools, in camps beside fire. Did they paint their faces before the hunt? Did they mark the bodies of the sick with symbols? Did they draw on hide, or on skin, or on stone? We cannot answer, but the pigment remains. Red as flame, red as memory, red as time itself. And in its silence, it tells us that these people were not only makers and hunters, they were feelers, grievers, dreamers. They had rituals, moments set apart from ordinary days, moments of mourning, moments of gratitude, moments when the world grew thin, and the boundary between the seen and unseen shimmered. In those moments, perhaps ochre was a key, a way to say, we are part of this, not separate, not above, but within. And when they rubbed the red earth onto the forehead of a child, or across the chest of a hunter returned to soil, they were not marking an end. They were coloring a passage, a continuation. The red dust of time binds past and future. It links us to them not through blood, not through name, but through the shared gesture of honoring. We, too, color our dead. We light candles, we speak names in quiet rooms, we place stones on graves. The Clovis, in their own time, made their offerings in ochre, in silence. In stone it is tempting to look back and see only survival of fluted point, the hunt, the fire. But they were more than survivors. They were human, and humanity is marked not only by what we make, but by what we mourn. The ochre says, we loved. The ochre says, we remember it. The ochre says, time is not lost, it is returned. So tonight, as you lie within the hush of this dark hour, let the red dust settle in your thoughts. Let it color your dreaming, not with sorrow, but with reverence. For the Clovis are not buried beneath history. They are carried in the pigment of the world. Still red, still sacred, it's a part of time's unfolding breath. Let the world grow colder now, as though the breath of the earth is drawn inward. For even as the Clovis people walked the lands beneath warming skies and open plains, a great change was stirring, silent, immense, inevitable. The glaciers, once in retreat, shuddered again. The winds shifted. The seasons betrayed their rhythm. The ice returned. This time is known to us as the Younger Dryas, a brief but sharp return to glacial cold, lasting little more than 1,000 years, yet changing everything. The earth had begun to warm after the last glacial maximum. Life returned, rivers flowed, forests crept northward, and then, suddenly, the world froze again. The Clovis were caught in this shift. They had known change before. Their ancestors crossed frozen steppes, followed the herds through the breath of snow. But this change was swifter, colder, less forgiving. The mammoths disappeared. The mastodons vanished. The great bison herds thinned. The prey grew harder to find, and the land at once generous grew guarded. Imagine them now, walking through a plain once lush with grass, now stiff with frost in mid. The river, once full, runs slow and dark beneath a skin of ice. The birds have flown. The sky no longer promises warmth. The stars above remain unchanged, but the breath beneath them is no longer steady. The Clovis did not crumble in panic. They adapted, as they always had. They followed new paths, sought new game, turned their hands to new tools. And yet, something shifted, not just in the land but in the culture. The fluted point, once ubiquitous, begins to fade from the record. New forms arise, Folsom, Dalton, and others, each responding to the new world. Each a sign of change, not just in tool, but in mind. Some say the cold killed the Clovis, but perhaps it was not death, perhaps it was transformation, a turning of the page. A new chapter, written not in extinction, but in reinvention. Still, the ice was no quiet guest. It scoured the land, sent storms across the plains, forced animals into new rhythms or out of existence altogether. Entire food webs collapsed. The pressure on the people grew, but they did not give up. They gave forward. Their knowledge flowed into those who followed. Their ways of reading, the land did not vanish, they shifted. The bones of mammoth gave way to the antlers of elk. The great hunts became smaller, more frequent, more careful. The elders who remembered the long herds passed into the smoke of memory, and their stories became legend, then myth, then silence. But the silence was not empty. It was full of what once was, and still is, for in the tools that followed, we see their hands. In the paths carved across the continent, we feel their feet. In the cold, in the ice, in the wind that once burned their skin, we remember the shape of their endurance. The Younger Dryas ended, as suddenly as it began. The world warmed once more. Forests returned. Rivers danced again. But the Clovis had changed, and what emerged in their place bore new names. Folsom, Plano, Dalton, new ways of being, drawn from the old, a new weaving of human life into the breath of the land. And so, the ice returned and was endured, not by conquest, but by listening, by slowness, by the same quiet courage that shaped the first flute into stone. Tonight, as the dark draws in around you, imagine the frost of long ago rising once more, not as fear, but as memory, not as loss, but as breath held between worlds. The Clovis were there. They did not flee the cold. They walked into it, they became it, and through that becoming, they continued. Breathe slowly now, for the road ahead is not paved with stone or soil, it is paved with memory, with the marrow of stories, with the long curve of those who came before. Tonight, we walk the bone road, not a road in the sense of path or trail, but a quiet way of movement, woven through the land by the living and the dead. It is the road the Clovis walked, not once or twice, but across generations, an invisible ribbon connecting seasons, herds, and histories. They were signs, markers, reminders. A mammoth rib lying along a windswept rise told the Clovis where others had hunted, where herds once gathered, where fire once smoked into the stars. A split femur beside a flint scatter marked a place of gathering. A child's tiny vertebrae buried near a riverbank spoke not only of loss, but of presence. The Clovis read bones the way others read letters, not just for what they were, but for what they meant. And in this way, The land became a book written in ivory and shadow. Their road was not fixed, but fluid, shaped by weather, guided by game. But always remember it, they may have returned to the same places each year, when the ice melted and the grasses stirred. Not to occupy, but to reconnect. To walk where their ancestors had walked. To sit where others once sat. To shape tools where ochre still clung to the soil. And each year, new bones joined the earth. A deer felled in a hunt. A hunter returned to the land. A child lost to fever, wrapped in furs, marked with pigment, and given to the dust. In time, these bones formed a path, not one we can see with modern eyes, but one that pulsed through Clovis memory. Perhaps they had no word for it. Perhaps they simply knew. The bone road stretched before them and behind them, and through it, they remembered. There is a story whispered in places like the La Prio mammoth site in Wyoming, where a young mammoth was felled near a stream and surrounded by Clovis tools. The bones, arranged just so, hint at intention, not just utility. But ceremony, why here? Why then? Because the bone road led them. Or the Anzac site in Montana, where the bones of a child were placed among stone blades and red dust tools, unused, unbroken. Offerings, farewells, waypoints, in the journey of the soul. These were not random burials. These were the Clovis did not build cairns or monuments. They left bones, and those bones spoke to those who followed. Sometimes they spoke of food, sometimes of family, sometimes of endings, but always they marked place. Even now, when we stumble upon a cache of tools buried beneath loam, we feel the pull. This was not discarded debris. This was memory stored in silence. A road shaped by absence, a trail marked by what is no longer moving, but still present, still felt, still guiding. The bone road may not be mapped, but it is known. It runs beneath our highways and towns, beneath fields and forests. It threads through rivers and mountain paths. It connects the Atlantic's wind with the Pacific's tide. And at its heart are the Clovis, walking slowly, listening to the land, placing memory into the earth with every step. Let us walk with them now, dreamer, not in haste, but in reverence. Let your breath become the wind across plains long vanished. Let your heartbeat echo the crunch of footfall over frozen grass. Let your silence mirror the hush of a hunter who stands beside the bones of a great beast and bows not in triumph, but in gratitude. This is the bone road. It is not lost, it is not gone. It is waiting, always. And as long as we remember how to walk gently, how to listen deeply, how to carry presence in every step, the Clovis walk it still, and so do we.
Be still now, dream. Let the night gather softly at the edges of your breath. We have walked fair across glacial plains and red-dusted graves, through firelit memory and the hollow of vanished herds. We have walked with the Clovis, and now, at the quiet edge of their story, what remains is not thunder. It is a whisper, not a whisper of voice, a whisper of presence, a whisper of knowing. For the Clovis people, despite all we have, uncovered points, bones, sights scattered like constellations across a continent remain mysterious, elusive, unfinished. We know so little, and yet we feel so much. Their legacy is not in dominance, but in rhythm. Not an empire, but an echo. They teach us, not with words, but with absence. They left no walls behind, but their paths are still etched into the breath of the land. They left no scriptures, yet their tools speak with the clarity of devotion. They raised no kings, yet every fluted point carries the weight of lineage. This is their whisper, to live in tune, to move with grace, to hold the land as sacred, not owned. The Clovis remind us that humanity is older than arrogance. That to be human is not merely to build, but to belong, to listen, to tend, to move through the world like water, shaping without breaking, holding without grasping. This whisper lives on in the way the wind moves through tall grass that has never known the plow, in the way the rivers remember their ancient curves long after we have tried to straighten them, in the quiet curve of a stone tool, found not with machines, but with patience. The Clovis are not lost. They are folded into the land. Their memory is not buried, it is breathed. In each sunrise that touches the face of the high plains, in each frost that silvers the boughs of the forest edge, in each silence that lingers between heartbeat and dream, we do not need to find them to know them. We need only slow down. We need only listen. And in that listening, the whisper comes. It says, "We were here, We walked with the wind. We sang to the bones. We shaped the stone, and we gave it back to the earth. You are not separate from us. You walk the same sky. You breathe the same rhythm. You, too, are a whisper in time. So carry us gently, not in museums alone, but in the way you look at the land, in the way you honor the silent, in the way you step through the world, not as a master, but as a guest. Tonight, as your breath slows and the stars blur above you, let the Clovis speak one last time. Not in grandeur, not in sorrow, but in stillness, the whisper remains. It always will.
And now, dear dreamer, as the final echoes of fluted stone fade into the hush of night, we drift gently from the realm of the Clovis, across the veil of time, and into the stillness of sleep. You have walked beside them through forgotten valleys. You have knelt by their fires and touched the bones of their memory. You have listened not to noise, but to silence shaped by presence. And now you return, not to a lesser world, but to one newly remembered. May the whispers of the ancient ones stay with you. May you carry their rhythm into your waking hours, not with weight, but with wonder, before you fall fully into your dreams. If these quiet journeys through time stir something sacred within you, something soft and curious and still, let your presence be felt with a gentle like. And if your spirit longs to walk these winding paths again, among the vanished and the remembered, among whispers and winds, join our circle of dreamers by subscribing to this shared passage through history's hidden realms. Let us wander together again, through forgotten civilizations, beneath silent skies, beside fires long extinguished but never truly gone. And tell us, fellow traveler of shadows, from where in the world do you dream tonight? Let the threads of place and time weave across oceans and time zones, until we are all bound quietly, reverently by this one gentle pursuit. To remember, to wonder, and as your eyes grow heavy, let the earth cradle you as it cradled them. Let the stars keep watch as they once did. Let your breath become the wind. Sleep now in the arms of memory. The Clovis are near, their whisper remains.